So let's get started with this fun topic. This is one that, has been on my list, and with other people kind of giving me a hints of what we need in some of these webinars. This is a unique one, in it's needed, it's confusing. The one I just did a couple weeks ago is technology and families. And I do talk about technology and the brain in there. And so, of course, habit forming things, positive, negative, avoidances. I teach the anxiety program. So, of course, they're all correlated to me, okay? As besides a family therapist, I did do addiction and substance abuse dependency is what it really is. What dependency, if I worked with offenders that had dependency, whether that was anger management, domestic violence, or substances. So they were to the point where they habitually continued to offend or their first time, and they got themselves into treatment that way. So I did some education and some work with that for many, many years. So I enjoyed working with that population for sure. And so it is a bit of my specialty in educating in groups with those folks. So, okay, so we're going to review the definitions, and there's so many definitions, but these are the basics. This is it's just a basic introduction to dopamine, how the brain works and self-talk, dopamine and reward system, and the stages of change. It's a model. And then habits, relapse, handouts. I always have handouts and references at the end of each PowerPoint. So I just kind of listed some of those instead of sending it out in a separate PDF that you can print off. But I have one of those too. But in the handouts, there's just some extra slides there with those handouts in them. So let's go over definitions. So, and let me know as we go if there's any, if you can hear me and everything's good as I just talk into this camera and as we go along here. So impaired control. So we're just going to go through several of these, not too much of a discussion, but it's basic. There's lots more to some of these, and yeah, definitely. So these are just basic. So what would it mean to be impaired and then have impaired control? So a craving or strong use or urge, right? So here's the urge. I always talk about urges. When we have an urge to do something, we have a very high desire. Now you go into self-talk, so you don't have impaired function, or you go into acting on that urge. So you have a desire. And when you have that desire and you desire to cut down on that use of something, doesn't matter what it is, then, and you have failed attempts to cut down on that, causes impairments. So when you have control, then you don't have impaired control. Does that make sense? So when you try to cut down, it's difficult and you don't have very good success rates, which we're going to talk about for sure. So impaired function, a level of limitations due to illness, mental health, substances, etc. So impaired function is more of daily tasks that, it can be a physical or mental impaired function. So physically, if you're in a substance abuse situation, your functioning is impaired for sure. If your mental health is impaired. So that's what that means a little bit. Social problems, of course, we use, this causes failure in completing major tasks at work, school, home. So your environment. Social problems is just, here's all the 9 environments. I have that handout at the end of this too. So here's home and social and leisure activities. You are giving up on them or you're cutting back on them because of use. Now, once again, we're not just talking about substances. We are talking about any kind of habitual use or doing something that you have an urge to do over and over again. So we're going to talk about that. Risky use. So this is just about, I know what the consequences will be, and I know what the problems will be. Maybe I've done it before, and I've had impairment, and despite all that, I still use. So it's a risky setting. It's a risky use. So think about, what you're taking this webinar for. Are you taking this webinar for yourself, for understanding, for your work, for someone that you work with, for a loved one, for, family member? So you have better understanding. So this is the beginning. I always start out with these understandings, which is educational, psychoeducational. So we kind of understand what's going on. I kind of hit the middle of like, okay, here's some things. I could go over statistics like crazy. I won't bore you too much with that. And our newest statistics of all of this, social problems, risky behavior, impaired function, avoidances. Avoidances is one of my favorite things to talk about in therapy because we have a lot of them, and we have lots of avoidance behaviors, which are called safety behaviors in my anxiety program. So we avoid something and we keep ourselves safe by avoiding something. Sounds awesome. It actually fuels the fire. So if we're avoiding keeping away from something for a period of time, that actually impairs our functioning. So going to the grocery store, right? If we can't go to the grocery store, okay, well, if you're sick, you don't go to the grocery store. If you're avoiding the grocery store, you can get away with it for a while, right? There's lots of ways to get food sent to your door now. It makes it pretty easy to avoid some connection with other things. So functioning or emotional. So this is my little note down here to kind of understand. Now, distractions are okay. Distractions are awesome. Actually, that's what I call them. Distractions are ways that we can just stop. We go distract ourselves. I go for a walk. I go outside. I just, we scroll through TV for a minute. But if it's for a teen, if it stays in an hour plus, it may turn into an avoidance. For adults, it's like, okay, and this is not just made up stuff here. This is like, okay, when our brain hits that 2-hour mark plus, if we are avoiding food, connection, emotion, okay, and we're not getting something else done. Now that doesn't mean we can't work for 4 hours straight, but really honestly, we should all work for 2 hours, have a 10-minute break, work for 2 hours. In a classroom, everything. We really need to have a break. I always do it 50 minutes usually with anything that's mentally straining. We should have 50-minute classes and then 10-minute breaks, right? So we just kind of have okay, let's have a break. Then we go back to the same thing even. But without a break, and if it's impairing, remember, functioning, connection, real connection, and emotions, and we're blocking emotions, then we've got an avoidance going on. So if that makes sense, we'll move on. And I can use an example, of alcohol and what avoidance is, because it stays with us for more than 2 hours, right? If we're at 0.04 and above. Withdrawals, a combination of physical and mental effects that experience is after stopping or reducing something, the use of something. So we have this with multiple things. We shop it, we drink it, we smoke it, we eat it, we watch it. Those are the top 5 things that I always count off my 5 fingers for Americans. In across the board, but really we are the most in debt, obese. I could go on with statistics, I won't. But so if we stop this, if we stop sugar, you're going to have a withdrawal. If you stop caffeine, you're going to have a withdrawal. If you stop TV, if we stop our smartphones and set them down, we're going to have some withdrawals. If it's physical and mental, like where you have urges and then you get anxiety, oh, okay. So we're going to have some physical, and so my question is, would you have a physical reaction of withdrawals if we, stomped on our smartphones and threw them away? I would probably like have a heart attack, maybe, with most people around, right? So it's like, I would have to like use my GPS in my head, which I don't have one. So let's see, how do I do, right? I would have a physiological response to not using my smartphone to just automatically like have to look at where I'm going. I think I could probably figure out the road signs again, but think about it. Everything just comes off the top of my head, just that analogy right there. So think about what would happen to you if you stopped something abruptly, and just like had no plan. Now, dependency is a physical mental dependence, which brings tolerance and withdrawals. Okay, so here's withdrawals. You're going to have an instant effect, okay, on the physiological body usually. Dependency is definitely brings tolerance and withdrawals. So if you're dependent, you're going to have tolerance issues and withdrawal issues. So you're conditioned to respond to an event or feeling in this certain way. Okay. Substance dependency. Substance use disorder is now the medical term for addiction. That's all I put on there. So we use dependency as the actual medical term instead of addiction. Okay. And then addiction is defined as changed behavior caused by a brain change from the continued use of a substance. Okay. For example, a substance abuse. It doesn't have to be a substance, by the way. It can be gambling. It can be, we'll talk about all those different things. I don't list out all the addictions that you can have, but it can be a lot of other things. But when the brain changes, and I'll show you about, some mirroring neurons, about how the brain changes with long-term use, with gaming, with, mirroring something. So it's not just substance use. Now, does that mean the brain changes? In neuroscience, we can't always say that it does, but we can say that if you have withdrawals and dependency on gaming, then are we changing the brain? I mean, it's up for debate, but the definitely continued substance abuse, we know that it changes organs, it changes the brain. So alcoholism, drugs, and all those definitely do that. But it's substance dependency is when you have tolerance and withdrawals. And relapse, returning to the behavior or illness after improvement, or you've quit after improvement, or you've completely quit and you've changed a new habit and you've gone back to the old habit. You replace this with this and you relapse. Okay. Moving on a little bit more about addiction is defined as a chronic relapsing disorder categorized by compulsive drug seeking and use despite consequences. We kind of talked about that. This is considered a brain disorder because it involves functioning that changes those brain circuits, which is reward, stress, self-control. For example, it changes those. It changes the frontal lobes. We know that. It definitely changes. And the reward system is up here. Self-control is up here. Self-talk is up here. Organizing is up here. And those are your frontal lobes. When those are blocked by a substance, which they are every time they block the frontal lobes, then you don't have the ability to have self-control as much. And the reward system is messed up. We're going to talk about dopamine today, which is the reward system. So the drugs interfere with the neurons, send and receive processing signals with the neurotransmitters. So they talk to each other. So, for example, marijuana, heroin, can activate neurons because their chemical structure mimics the natural neurotransmitters in the body. Same thing with opioids and, in that category of opiates. And so cocaine can cause the neurons to release abnormal amounts, large amounts of natural neurotransmitters, or to prevent the normal recycling of these brain chemicals by interfering with the transporters. So long story short, the way we're talking with our neurotransmitters, with the transporters and common communication, that gets messed up and blocked. So a little bit of that, if you wanted to get all scientific. I've had really a lot of fun with a little bit more science with this stuff, because it's definitely scientific. It's brain stuff. So we're talking about the brain today. So Chris Prentice is one of my, he's definitely in my top 10 authors of favorite authors. Okay. I talk about him in several different, I reference him in several different workshops, but I love how he writes. So when I have several books of his, The Laws of Love. I have Zen, The Art of Happiness. That's by him. And so when I came across his other books, I came across this book. Okay. So The Addiction Cure, Alcoholism and Addiction Cure, The Holistic Approach to Total Recovery. This is his little quote. Now, yeah, right? Cure. I have a hard time with that word too. But you can take it as it is. This is just a quote from his book. You are not an alcoholic or an addict. You are not incurable. It's not an incurable disease. You have merely become dependent on a substance or an addictive behavior. So it's always a behavior. It's a habit. It's a behavior to cope with an underlying condition that you're now you are now going to heal, at which time your dependency will cease and completely and forever. So he's saying it will cease. He talks about his program, the people that he's helped, how to end relapse completely, how to end suffering, and heal the underlying causes, which there always are. There always are an underlying condition. Always, always, always. That's an always for me and science. So, okay, so this is the complication of the brain. This is just a little fun visual, right? So the brain is so complex. We're like, you look at all these things, and the frontal lobe here, does so many things, but then it is contingent on so many other things. When you have a visual come in, your frontal lobes will process that in self-talk one way or the other, automatically or not. So there's lots here. That's all. That's just fun stuff. Okay, so we're going to go into mindset a little bit and understand, and I'm going to go into this next slide right here, because we're going to go backwards here about self-talk in the brain and what happens to that. So by the way, this is Dan Siegel, and I don't have it actually, this book reference in the back, so it's right there, but it's from Brainstorm. So this is dialectical behavioral therapy. This is from like an anxiety program that I teach. It teaches you about wise mind. They're all connected. So his is integration to these 2 points, of course. Here's wise mind, same thing. So here's reasonable mind, which I call the logical brain, and here's the emotional brain. The right, left brain comes together, and you have wise mind. Okay, so when we get that messed up with dependency on something, we usually are blocked with these things. We're not using wise mind. We're not looking at it. Here's a logical, here's the emotional, and putting them together. So that's just a little visual. We need insight, we need empathy, and we need integration. We have to add all these skills together to get there. And we need the frontal lobes, which is where wise mind is. Remember, logic and emotional mind is up here in your right, left brain. So So here's your front and right, left brain again. Okay, so this is just where we do some of it. Like I said, our physical response, our reward system, our reasoning, our organizing. It's where we self-talk. So I have this, slide in several other workshops, and I pointed out right here in this workshop because of number 3. So we haven't talked about number 3 before. I've talked about fight, flight, or freeze like crazy. You can watch my other ones for that. I've talked about burnout. And here's a mental disorder. Why we would stay in the midbrain and we wouldn't be up here doing wise mind, okay, is these 4 reasons. Why we don't self-talk, because we're in fight, flight, or freeze, number 1. We're in burnout, number 2. We're in the back of the brain. So there's lots of mental disorders that sit in the midbrain back here. Lots. All of, there's like 14. And I always, spout them off. But you probably could figure out what they are. PTSD, OCD, generalized anxiety disorder, major depressive disorder, agoraphobia, any of the anxiety disorders. We sit in the back of the brain. So we don't self-talk as much when we're back there. So we have to bring ourselves really literally back to here. So the reasons why we don't self-talk, number 3 is impaired. So when I teach substance abuse, okay, what happens to impairment when those frontal lobes are blocked by benzos, opiates, alcohol, street drugs, illegal drugs, prescription drugs? We've got them, and where they impair that emotion, we impair some of that. We impair reasoning sometimes. And so when you're at 0.04, which is the beginning stages of alcohol impairment, 0.05 is our DUI rate in Utah. So 0.04, the impaired process starts happening in the frontal lobes. And how much that is, it's not very much for the average person. And so when impairment happens, we don't have as much self-talk. And you can argue with me, like, yeah, I have lots of self-talk, right? Oh yeah, I can self-talk, but are we using wise mind and we're using logic and reasoning together and emotion? Most of the time, no. So we get to a point where we have a reaction, we have physical reaction. So you'll be tired, or you'll be happy, or you can have a physical and emotional reaction and be angry. So that's the cause of that. And the self-talk goes down. So that's just an example of what happens to the brain when it's hijacked and the frontal lobes are hijacked by something. So with that knowledge, we go into reward systems, because remember, the frontal lobes is hijacked, the reward system is hijacked, for example. So here's a little picture of dopamine. I loved listening to this podcast about dopamine. I just listened to Dopamine Nation. I have it referenced, and the other podcast by Huberman Lab, and Dopamine Nation I just listened to in 2 days because it was so stinking interesting, and so published just recently, the end of this last year. And so Dopamine Nation talks a lot about the dopamine and the people that she has treated for addictions of all kinds. So the beginning of her book explains that, and then it goes right into her clients and different stories of how they have overcome some of their addictions. So it's pretty strong, but really actually pretty interesting. So just know that here's the frontal cortex, what we're talking about. And then here's this, brain cells, neurons, and then here's dopamine. So it comes in, and this is just the limbic system, reward system, little picture. Someone asked, why is it important to self-talk? So here's processing and here's focus, okay? So sometimes that gets disrupted. For example, in autism, the processing is just not quite connecting, right? So that means they don't self-talk as much. They can't self-talk their way out of their sensory issues when you're autistic. And so then that cause severe, I guess, what would be the word? Disorganized thought, panic, fear, control issues. It sends you into a frenzy of just feeling out of control. And so when we're not self-talking, we don't talk ourselves into something or out of something, that would be a problem, right? If we're blocked in the frontal lobes, we're not going to have all of the information, logic and emotion together into wise mind to make great decisions. We don't make great decisions. So let me go back to the point of this is thoughts that come in. We have a thought comes in. We have to self-talk that sends us to a feeling all the time. This is how we work. This is CBT stuff. And then we have a behavior or an action and a result. So in that cycle, that will keeps going. So if you have a feeling, you can self-talk yourself through that feeling. Okay, am I going to die right now? Is this going to end? Am I going to do okay? Should I call someone? Oh, wait, I should slam on my brakes. We don't have self-talk when we're in fight-flight freeze. It keeps us alive. So that's great. See what I'm saying? We got to just slam on the brakes. We don't self-talk like, oh, what should I do? Let me think. And so that keeps us alive, but we got to come out of that so we can self-talk. Like, oh, now what do I do? I'm slammed on my brakes in the middle of the freeway, or I hit someone, or I didn't, or all those things. So then we go into a behavior, then we go into a thought, then we go into feeling, then we go into behavior. So hopefully we have a little better behavior if we're self-talking. Now fight, flight, or freeze just keeps us alive, like I said, and it just keeps us going. And so we just do things. We just fight or we freeze. So it still can keep us alive. So we got to have self-talk. But then once again, in fight, flight, or freeze, we don't have self-talk most of the time. We just run or we just freeze. So let's talk about dopamine. If that answers your question, let me know if it doesn't. There's lots of, we got to process those things. So if that's blocked, it's not going to be as easy to make great decisions. So this is just basic dopamine 101 here, if you will. So two main pathways are from the bottom of the brain. So dopamine, like that picture, there's two main pathways from the bottom of the brain. It drives motivation, mindset, mood, cravings, time, movement. It even makes you move, right? If the dopamine on my break before this class said, you've got to go outside, you got to get out of your office, you got to go outside. I went outside from it. It's like really nice. It's like, oh, that made me move. It made me have a different behavior. It gave me excitement to just go outside. So it's super nice out there. And then I look around in my yard, and then I did a little bit of, just a few things, and then ate an orange, and it's like, oh, okay. That's it. But you got to have, so we're going to go into motivation later in one of my handouts, but it drives it. It drives craving. It also makes time either stop or speed up. So what is anxiety? Anxiety makes time speed up. Depression makes time stop. So look at what drives motivation. Are you really motivated when you're depressed? Probably not. That's no. But are you really motivated when you are really anxious and having a panic attack and you have no idea where time is just sped up and you're like, wow, it's been a half hour and I've been having a panic attack? No, you're in fight, flight, or freeze, either place of those. So that's dopamine receptors. And then everyone has a different baseline. So this is from how you can understand this. So everyone has a baseline of dopamine. So when your dopamine drops below your baseline, you're what that's called boredom. So here's teenagers, back to the book brainstorm. This is all Dan Siegel's work with teenagers. The brain's pruning. So your dopamine levels in a teen are extremely high, the highest they'll ever be in their life in adolescence, because their brain's pruning. They have 3 times more dopamine than us, right? So look at, it drives behavior, on mood, cravings. It kind of can actually cause you to have some risky behavior. Think about when, we're adolescents, the most risky behavior you'll ever do is during that time. And time doesn't matter when you're an adolescent sometimes. And so here's the baseline, here's the peak. So baseline, peak. So when we come down to the baseline, teenagers are like, I'm bored, I need to look at my phone. And they don't, they can't sit in that baseline. They want more, peak. And so guess what drugs do? And anything else that peaks your dopamine. So guess what happens? You have a bigger space too. Here's a huge, big peak. This is what drives reward. Winning a game after playing it, sex, drugs, anything that peaks that dopamine really high, you want to try to peak that again. The author of Dopamine Nation talks about, she read books and she read the Twilight series, and then she read it 4 times. Do you think she had the same dopamine peak on the 3rd or 4th read as the first one? Heavens no. So we try to find that again. And what do? We get frustrated. We don't get that again. And then we're like, this is depressing. So dopamine molecules are seeking and they provide, and therefore pleasure. So those molecules are seeking pleasure. Dopamine not only acts as a reward, but also plays as a role in finding memories of that event, of the stimuli. So think about it. Think about the last time you had a memory of just a really good high, a really good joyful situation that was super, super good. I will never forget the day that my grandson crawled, not walked, he wasn't walking it. And I was on the floor with him on my bed, and I looked in his eyes and he was just my first little babe, right? And the joy, that memory of that reward was so high. I've never experienced it. That just came off the top of my head. So that was a joy. That was a reward that I could not have expected. And it's a memory of mine that never leaves my brain. But that's an event and a stimuli of emotion. So when is the last time you hit a good reward that plays a role in that? And then, it's like, well, I want that again. So what do? I spend a lot of time and energy and money on my value system with my grandkids. And I know I don't look old enough to have but I do. So it's like, think about it. So write that down if you're keeping notes. Where is your reward system that gave you a healthy reward? That was a stimuli of emotion. Now, fear and energy, it is dopamine, is an energy and fear cousin. Okay. So it also can send you into fight, flight, or freeze very quickly, right? You go into your fear, and your energy gives you energy to fear what you're going to fear, and you run, and it's going to give you adrenaline. So that's a little bit on dopamine there, and a little more. For example, some peaks. So this is the dopamine peaks and highs, right? So peaks and lows, baseline. So here's your baseline, and you eat chocolate. That's a 1.5 times in peak. Sex is just 2 in general. Nicotine 2.5 times dopamine when you hit some nicotine. Do a little cocaine, that's 2.5. Now, 10 times any stimulant beyond cocaine, that is your Adderall, that sends you into dopamine receptors 10 times. Caffeine, just a bit. Little bit of joy, right? Layering can damage relapse dopamine, and dopamine, let's see, relapse dopamine, the drop. So chronic pain can reduce dopamine. Okay. So we just, there's lots of factors in this, but this is the baseline. And exercise. I thought this was really interesting. So statistically in neuroscience, exercise jumps up 2 times of dopamine when you exercise for just a very short amount of time. But if you hate it and you don't like running, like you're running, say, and you tell yourself that you hate it, you don't love it, you get 0 dopamine, 0. And that's why we won't be motivated to do it again, folks. And then we don't like to run, and then we don't do, but if you really hate exercise and you tell yourself, so then we go into the growth mindset or fixed mindset. It's definitely what the story that you tell yourself, you won't get dopamine. You won't do it again. You won't be motivated to do it again. Baseline drops with lower, even lower with depletion. So depression, for example. So when we have a baseline that drops into depletion, you just can't get past that. Burnout, spiking dopamine during the week. Okay. So what do we do? Huberman talked about this part. So we extremely exercise, substance abuse, gaming. We get all these wins. We're really on a high 5 days out of 7, and we're working and working and working and working and working. Guess what? You burn yourself out, and it spikes your dopamine. It will burn out your dopamine too. So if we have extreme highs consistently, you will burn out your dopamine and your baseline, right? And your peak. So think about it. How do we get burned out? Taper, remove, and fast from these activities are what we have to do. So you think, well, how do we fix our dopamine? Taper, remove, or fast from it. So we talk about intermittent fasting. We talk about having a break from our phones. We talk about just having a break for 10 minutes from the stimuli and going back to it. It works. That's all. I could be done right now, right? But it's not that easy. So, but we do have to remove, and of course, modifications to those activities. Definitely taper, remove, or reduce. It could say reduce also. So for example, large surges of dopamine teach the brain to seek and repeat the experience over and over again. Now, healthier goals and activities, we can also do the same. So here's the experience. Here's the other side. It actually hijacks the brain again. It teaches the brain that seek for that experience, seek for that experience. That's definitely drugs, right? Seek for that high again, seek for that high again, seek for that high again. And it will hijack the brain. And the dopamine receptors teaches them to seek and repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat. So we can also do that the same way with habits. And I don't love, but I have 2 copies of this. So but that's just one book, The Power of Habit. I'm more focused most of the time on the stages of change, because I've used that for years. It's a model that I'm going to go over soon. But here's the Huberman episodes, by the way, 53, 50, 39, and 33. You can just Google that. He's on everything. He's on Amazon Prime. He's on my Audible. He's on Spotify. He's on YouTube. He's on HubermanLab.com. You can go to one of these episodes that he has. Okay, any questions? We need to have a check-in. Any chats? So this is the stages of change that I just mentioned. So there is technically, it's the 6 stages of change is the original model, okay? So there's 6 stages here. So very simple. I have a handout to this that is a little bit more explanatory, but so it's very simple to me. And I've explained it and taught it for so long. So pre-contemplation, just think about the stages. Now we're getting into change now. How do we change a behavior? How do we get out of relapse? How do we get out of habitual, addictions, if you will, and dependencies that are not good for us because we've decided in our value systems they're not working for us anymore. Working too hard, it doesn't matter. Workaholic, gambleaholic, alcohol, it doesn't matter. It's all the same. I use this example with food. Someone gets diabetes, he has to go in, get her blood work done. She has to change a behavior. And this is scientific. It's not overnight. It's not scientifically done in 21 days. It can for some behaviors, most of the time not. And so here's the stages. I'll run through. Foods, sugars, pizzas. Someone chatted to say, yeah, what about food and pizza and sugar? Oh, I could go into that in just for a whole hour, but we're a very addicted nation to sugar, and it does spike, but it's mostly chewing. Just chewing spikes dopamine. I don't think it's as high as what was listed, but yeah, dopamine can spike some things by just that's why crunchy potato chips are so good, right? Even though I ate a donut, it's not, it's the sugar, it's the chocolate, it's the fried, it's like, oh, I deserve it. It's my, yeah. So you can make it whatever you want. And I'm going to definitely get dopamine from that donut. Okay. So here's the stages. Pre-contemplation, denial. That's all I need to know. Contemplation. Within a month, I'm going to do something new. I'm thinking about it. I'm going to do something new. How many times I've put Dr. Pepper, and actually I'm completely off soda as of, a couple months. So it's like, okay, all through the holidays even. And I remember, I'll go on a squirrel here for a minute. When I was in grad school, we had an advanced addiction class, and we had to do something for 6 weeks, right? We had to eliminate something that we wanted to eliminate. And of course, some people went off sugar, some people went off internet, some people went off Dr. Pepper, that was me. Some people went off, just other things. And we had to do it for 6 weeks straight. And then we had to talk about relapses. It is what it is, yeah, we're not getting off hard drugs. But it is what it is. It's a routine. It's a reward system. It was my, how could I have Dr. Pepper and popcorn, without popcorn, without Dr. Pepper? How can I go to the movies? I was like, what? How would I have fries without Dr. Pepper? Like, what? So I had to come up with something, to replace the habit. I had to go through these stages, but it was like, wait, I'm not in denial because I was in denial. And now my teacher has told me that this is part of, our class that we have to do. I've had families do this. I've heard of families doing this. Pick one thing, to do some tapering, fasting, something from a habit to see if you can sit in your pain. Isn't that fun? So contemplation, within a month, I'll change something. I didn't have that because I went right into prep. So you have to go into prep stage. Prep is like, okay, I'm going to plan for the changing of my behavior. So someone that has diabetes that has to eat differently, they have to get a nutritionist, they have to go to the gym. Because that's what the doctor said, to get your blood sugar down and keep it down here, we've got to do these behavioral changes. So you prep. So that person had to prep. They had to find a gym, they had to figure out what to do. They had to get stuff out of their house. We have to do all that prepping. That could take a minute, but if it does take you too long, you're not going to get past to action. Action, by the way, is 1 to 3 months of experimental. You just experiment. You can relapse at any point. You can relapse at prep. You can relapse at contemplation. You can relapse at action. You can relapse in maintenance. So relapse is anywhere in between, okay, these areas. Action, 1 to 3 months. It's action's a 6-month total period. 6 months. It's because the brain takes that long to begin to form new neural pathways. So you are just experimenting. 3 to 6 months of the new behavior, okay? And that takes some commitment of time and energy. That's time, energy, and money, by the way, usually. No, you don't have to, it doesn't cost you anything to do some things for sure. Maintaining a new behavior for 6 months to 5 years, and you can relapse. So most successful, this is a little self-disclosure, not self-disclosure, little, no, this is a little disclosure down here at the bottom. Most successful self-changers go through the stages 3 or 4 times before they make it through the cycle of change without at least one slip up, one relapse at least. So when I was moving through, one of the best ways to stay in action is accountability. Okay, my little tip here. When I am testing someone's, if they're being drug tested, they're going to have some accountability. They know they have to be drug tested. If you're recording your use, if you're recording your water intake, if you're recording your alcohol use of how much you're spending of time and energy and money, I guarantee you, you'll start staying in action. So that's a real big tip there. If you don't record your sleep, how are you going to get out of burnout? How are you going to do something new if you are not knowing what's going on? So I always have people track. It's a first step. So so you can be accountable to yourself, to someone else, to anyone else. I mean, it's really hard to keep track of things. When I am doing a new habit of a 21-day meditation, which I'm in, I write down, day, this is what I felt when I did this 10-minute, 21-day meditation program. And by the way, you can find those. I have one, it's free on Audible too. You put in 21-day meditation, you just do something for every day, and then you repeat it, and it's just one thing. If you want to gain a new habit, pick 4 or 5 new things you're going to do during the day, and set forth my little notes here of like how to do that. That's just one way to say, okay, so your goal is to do 4 out of the 6 new things for the day, and you can hit 4 of them. It's not a failure. It's not a relapse. If you don't hit all 6, it's 4 out of the 6, something new you're going to do. So drink more water, meditate every day, go on a walk, do, belly breathing, whatever it is, call a friend every day, write down, keeping track of something. There's 4 right there. Something new that you haven't done. Okay, so we're running out of time. So we're going to get to a couple of these. So phone and gaming use, they're just here for some awareness. There's just, just more signs here. Once again, 1 hour plus without breaks. Okay, safety behaviors. Are we using our gaming and our use of phones as a mirroring neuron? Okay, which is also gambling, porn, anything you're mirroring, which is Netflix, anything you're in deep and you lose. It's not a distraction anymore as a reward. It's an avoidance. It's not a reward system anymore. We think it's a reward, but it's not. Escaping from uncomfortable thoughts, feelings, experiences, avoidant behavior. Okay, you're escaping phobias. You're escaping so you can do abuse. You can do self-soothing, harmful, disapproval, fear of failure. All those kind of things. But they turn into safety behaviors, so we don't have to face something else. It definitely maintains anxiety. This is what it does. Addiction to the internet. I mean, you can watch my Technology and Families if you want, a little bit of that, but it's just some, some quoting here. of a couple articles about smartphone addiction, withdrawal problems, relapse, sleep issues, of course, mood modifications, and conflict when we, I mean, there's stuff here, right? We all know that we would have withdrawals if we all got rid of our smartphones. So this is where we have to go into, what does this look like for you, for your family, for your work, for people that you work with? It doesn't matter. Time, energy, money is our own value system. So what do we do with our time, energy, money? I can tell where people's value systems are, of what they're spending their time, energy, money on. If they're going through a program and they're trying to, get out of the situation that they're in, they're going to spend a lot of time, energy, money getting out of that situation. Because working hard is hard. But like I said, here's the reward system of motivation. So I'm going to get to that slide right here. I'm always ahead of myself, and I don't, I make these slides and I know what's next. And so, okay, this is my own collaboration of everything, right? Of several books and different, research, but self-discipline. I mean, I could go into self-discipline with the 1970s marshmallow study. Delaying gratification, same thing. So here's self-discipline, and then here's delaying gratification. You have to have self-discipline to get to delay gratification. Then you have to have a reward system. Once again, there's that 2-hour distraction, or 2-hour plus is an avoidance. It has to be a healthy reward system. And that leads us in the brain to reward yourself to get to motivation, which is dopamine, which is a good feeling. You're going to repeat the behavior, whether it's, an avoidance or a good, healthy reward system. But inside, outside forces, emotion behind it, we have to have a core value of it to be able to do it again, if it's going to be on that scale of self-discipline. And so that's just a little bit of that. Here's some 5 R's of how we get there. Okay, we have to be responsible and we have to have a routine. And so here's the resilience, take time. And then the 6 stages is over here. That's the resilience part. That means the brain has to change its neural pathways to keep doing it and to get to self-discipline. Self-discipline in The Road Less Traveled by Scott Peck, he says, yeah, we have to learn self-discipline and delaying gratification by 5. We have to teach that. That doesn't mean, that everybody that's over 5 that hasn't learned that is never going to learn that. But we don't live in that kind of world with delaying gratification. I want my Amazon and I want it tomorrow. I don't even want, I might want it today. I don't have to wait for things. We don't have to wait for dopamine. We used to have to wait and really earn it to have a reward system to get to motivation, and then we'll redo it again. That's been delayed. That's been, cut a lot in the last 20 to 40 years. So that's another whole other subject. But in delaying gratification, if you want more of that, The Road Less Traveled talks about that in balance. So here's some handouts, and you can chat me if you have any questions. This is on environment. So this is like, pick an environment. Once again, remember those 4 to 6 things you want to improve or change a habit, add to your life. You can do pick one, home. So you have a new habit of cleaning up something for 10 minutes every day. Relationships, nature, financially. So all those things, just pick one and then do something in that category. Got to clean it up in order to change something. If you want to log your time, remember, if you're accountable and you want to keep track of your time, we all have 160 hours a week. What are you doing with your time, energy, money? And how much time spent? If you don't know how much time is spent, you don't know where to start and where to end and how to make a new habit. This is just stages of change. It's just another little spiral there. And here's your core value list. You want to pick your top 5 and some books. So that's the Dopamine Nation, how to connect with your smartphone obsessed kid. And Francis, let's see, Johan Hari is about lost connections. Oh yeah, he's like my other, oh my gosh, like yeah, Chasing the Screen. So this guy, so he has a brand new book coming out at the end of the month. It's already on order for me. I get it in about a week. But lost connections causes the real causes of depression. Chasing the Screen, he wrote this first, the first and last days of the war on drugs. So that's that guy. Okay, and mindset, I talked about growth mindset, fixed mindset. That's Carol DeWick up here at the top for mindset. And there's your books for some of them, most of them. So anything else before we end today?